Can Black people be racist?
In the spirit of Donald Trump, we're just not going to pay our bills.
Native Land Pod is now shut down.
The WWE specialist turned Education Secretary.
Our rights get taken away with our eyes wide open.
What are you actively doing to not feel the despair?
If you don't feel hopeful, please tune into this podcast.
At some point, budgets became partisan.
I think we often make the bar for entry too damn high.
Because we're asking people to care about everything, and they end up caring about nothing.
You don't have to be an Angela Rye.
I'm trying to figure out who's requiring that of anybody. Native Land Pod is a production in partnership with Reason Choice Media and iHeartRadio.
Welcome.
Welcome home, y'all. This is episode 70 of Native Land Pod. I am your host, Angela Rye. This is your host, Andrew Gillum, and this is your host, Tiffany Cross. We are thrilled to be with...
What's up, fam?
Yes. All right. What's up? We are thrilled to be with y'all today. We have a lot to get into. What do y'all want to talk about today?
I'm excited. This is Angela's topic that she chose, but I'm super excited to talk about it. Angela had the opportunity to go down to Selma for the 60th commemoration of Bloody Sunday, which is, of course, when Black folks crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge to fight for voting rights. And so Angela was on ground and wanted to talk about what has changed since Selma. And I'm salivating at the opportunity to get into that.
I love that. Well, ladies, I wanted to just bring up, while it may be on this topic of the 60 letters that the federal government, Department of Education, Civil Rights Division sent to colleges and university, really cracking down on protests on college campuses and essentially saying that these 60 institutions that are now under federal investigation need to do better to protect Jewish students. And I just want to explore a little bit at what cost, how this differentiates between how the Civil Rights Act has been used previously in its application to make universities a welcoming environment, and would just love to dialogue with y'all about where we could potentially see this go when we think about DEI and other efforts by the federal government to basically squash it out of any governmental institution.
Got it. Thanks, Andrew. I want to talk a little bit about this pending government shutdown and this continuing resolution, which is essentially a budget stopgap measure that passed the House. Before we recorded, it's being considered right now in the Senate as we record, and we'll talk about what are congressional Democrats getting wrong about the urgency of the moment with the stopgap measures, the backdrop. And of course, we're going to get into Target fast because that's what Black folks want to talk about everywhere right now. So welcome home, y'all. We're going to dive into the show.
Welcome home.
Hi, Native Land Pod. My name is Rachel. I live in the Bronx, and I'm just coming to you with a pretty important question to me right now, which is in regard to boycotts. Currently, there have been a lot of boycotts of various corporations or calls to boycott various corporations. And I just want to understand how we do that effectively without hurting the folks that we don't want to hurt in this very integrated economy. I think we are in a very different economic space than we were in the 1960s. And while it's understandable that we boycott some places, others are pretty wide-reaching, have a multicultural workforce, employ a lot of Black and brown people specifically, and loss in revenue may first hit them before it hits the pockets of the large corporate owners of these places that we definitely do want to hurt. But how can we be more strategic about how we go about these boycotts, considering that the integration of our economy and that we don't want to hurt Black and brown people and other folks who are working class?
Power concedes nothing without a demand. Target feels our demand. I want to thank you. Over 140,000 people are standing strong against the injustices practiced by Target. We believe if we are spending $12 million a day, that you need to respect us. We absolutely believe if Target is one of the largest employers of Black people, second only to the federal government, you need to honor us. And so people by the thousands are pulling off and not pulling into Target. Their stock has dropped by 13%, lowering it by $12 a share. They've already lost over $2 billion in their value. I'm so thankful we're just getting started, and we ain't going to let nobody turn us around. I need you to sign up at targetfast.org right now because the movement is moving, and we won't stop till we get enough. Stay plugged in.
And let me find out we ran a commercial. Jamal, we love you for real, but I'm going to tell you this right now, you guys. I signed up on targetfast.org to support what they're doing, and I was floored by some of the things that they've listed, like the thoroughness of the demand, the thoroughness of the approach, the ways in which they carefully and strategically, almost surgically laid out what should be happening since last week, Ash Wednesday, on the Target Fast for 40 days. So I'm eager to hear what you all have to say. Clearly, I like it. I want to hear what y'all think.
I love it. I just want to first say for our viewers, to understand what Pastor Jamal Harris Bryant is going through. There have been protesters outside his church since he's been on the forefront of this fight and very outspoken civil rights leader. Is not just a fast that he's promoting, but he's actually, to Angela's point, thinking through long-term strategy that I'm sure we'll be talking about in the weeks to come on this show. The last that he referenced, the protesters who were in front of his church, they were holding up signs talking about free Derek Chauvin, who is, of course, the police officer who murdered George Floyd. So he really is putting himself in harm's way, leading this charge. So I just first want to express my gratitude, because that's what it takes. Fearless, bold leadership that we're not seeing in some of our democratic institutions, that we are seeing in some of the different sectors out here that promote us. Black consumers have reached a $2 trillion buying power. That's according to Nielsen. And we have to start thinking about how we want to exercise that buying power. And I will say it's really challenging, because Target is not the only place, but we have to start somewhere and build momentum from that. But my former employer, Paramount, who is, of course, the parent company for BET, VH1, and a bunch of other media outlets, they are proactively reconsidering their DEI approach because of the Trump administrations. Corporations are proactively capitulating to this administration. So I do think that we have to start considering how we want to exercise the buying power of $2 trillion in this country and hit them where it hurts. And if you target white man's money, I just feel like that's when you get attention.
I feel that. I I want to go specifically to this question of the market today and the interrelatedness of industry, and our economy is different today than it was in the 60s. That is true. And in truth, and Reverend Bryant, Bishop, I like to call him, mentioned this on the offset, that power sees nothing without a demand. And boycotts, especially in this time where we have Black folks who are vendors to Target. The good news is that most, if not all of them, are able to still direct sell you their product, in addition to having it on store aisles. But I think we have to consider with this question of who might we be hurting, and could we potentially be hurting one of us who have worked hard, gotten their brands on the shelves, and so on and so forth. And I would say, one, we do want to do everything we can not to hurt those individuals, which is why going to them directly and buying the products that you want from them is the next best thing we can do if we can't get it off of a shelf. But we have to demonstrate a discipline to do that. But boycotts are about the dignity and the strength of all of us. And it prioritizes the dignity and strength and respect for our community above what any one individual who may be benefiting on the back end might get by way of sales as a provider on a Target platform. So I guess what I'm saying is while I love many of the people who I know who are African American, Black women mostly, who are doing their biz with Target, they've come up with their own set of demands and expectations that they want from the company. And the best thing we can do is demonstrate that we have their backs, even within that corporation, by saying, look, if you don't pay attention to Black money, Black green dollars, then you are missing a huge swath of the economic opportunity that exists for this corporation, this brand, so on and so forth. And to my colleagues and friends' point, Tiffany, that a lot of folks are getting ahead of the government, and basically the corporations are redefining DEI or dismissing it summarily without being asked necessarily by the government, basically trying to curry favor. There are also organizations, entities, corporations who are on the opposite side saying we're doubling down in our work. We're not getting rid of this. We're not deprioritizing it. And so I guess what I say is Target made a choice here, as have other companies have made a choice. And now as a consumer, it's important for us to make a choice as well. And this is the last thing. The Montgomery bus boycott, which I talked about on my solo pod on Monday, was initially scheduled to be a one-day protest in Montgomery. When that day came, November 5th, and the city buses all across Montgomery were empty of Black riders, it shocked the system, and white folks in the city had no idea what was happening and what was coming. Well, y'all, they felt so good at the end of that day, they said, let's extend this thing further. We got to keep it going until we bend them toward our will. And 382 days later, the people won. So I'm just saying these things take time, but we can absolutely bend it toward our will.
I have a question for Angela. Because we know Melissa Butler, friend of the show and friend of ours. She is the CEO of the Lip Bar. And we all love Boss Lady, her lipstick. She's also carried by Target. So show Melissa some love. But again, I think it's important to explain to people how we can keep this boycott up, but also support people like Melissa Butler and the Lip Bar. Like, can we go to their websites?
Yes.
Also, your friend, I met her, but I don't remember her name, but you had on this really cute outfit. And I was like, who is that? And I think Kalani, is that her name?
Kalana Barfield.
Kalana Barfield, who also has a line in Target. How can we make sure, because Andrew brought up a really good point, like, do they have websites where we can go directly to them? Like, how are they protected?
Yes, Kalana was part of the Black Creators Program that was launched through what the Trump administration would now totally brand as a DEI component of Target's work. So she was one of the creators, and Sergio was one. Faye Noel was one. So Kalana doesn't have an ongoing line with Target, although she's consulted them. I don't know the status of that contract. I apologize. I didn't know this question was coming. And Melissa, you can definitely purchase her products at thelipbar.com, and she's encouraged people to do as such. So I know that phase 2 is starting with this targetfast.org. I encourage people to go to the website once so you could see the many things that Jamal Bryant has put together with a number of colleagues and acquaintances of ours, including Tamika Mallory, including Nina Turner, and others. But the faith community is deepening down into this. I think that it's important for us to understand that we can always support our brands, and we know how to find things like concert tickets. We know how to find things like our movie tickets and things that where we want to go see and participate. We figure out a way to get there. So if you want to continue to support these brands and you want to show American corporations or international corporations, for that matter, if they're going down the same troubled road as the Trump administration, what you're about, support your own. And I think that there's never a better time than now to do just that. So with that, speaking of shutting things down, stock markets and all, we want to get into government shutdown, potentially, the continuing resolution?
Give us the word, you, Madam from the Hill.
Well, let's go to a question on this first, and we'll jump right into it.
Hey, what's up, Native Land? This is Craig again in Brooklyn. Angela, Tiff, Andrew, I hope you guys are doing well. I've just been thinking about a lot about the chaos that has been going on lately in government. It feels very apocalyptic to me, but that's a whole nother conversation. But my question is this. When I think about the Republican Party, I think about a party that is very strategic, very effective in their messaging, but their major flaws, of course, is that they lie. When I think about the Democratic Party, I see a party that is very piss poor in their messaging, despite what their good intentions may be. So we got one side that's lying, but is good at it, and another side that is really bad at their messaging and gets in the way of whatever they want to do. So my question is this: with the midterm elections coming up, how can we as a community educate our voters or potential voters out there without using big, ginormous concepts like constitutional crisis or threat to democracy or oligarchy and all those different things? What are some ways that we can meet them where they are?
Yeah. The question in summation, thank you, number one, for sending that in, is why are Democrats so bad at messaging? Maybe it's because the truth is harder to package with a nice little bow. I don't really know, but I don't think it's fair to say all Democrats are ineffective in their messaging. Historically, in recent history at least, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has broken through, and so has Jasmine Crockett, among many others. The backdrop I wanted to talk about this in is H.R. 1968. Imagine that name. Which was the continuing resolution that the House of Representatives passed, that now the Senate is considering, that if it passes would prevent, arguably, a government shutdown, when in actuality, I believe that the government has been shut down since Donald Trump was sworn in. That is my argument, that from a good faith perspective, that the government has been shut down once this man gave the keys to this South African from, Elon Musk, who has been going rogue and slashing with his chainsaw across government agencies without regard for how it would impact the American people, the taxpayers that fund these varying entities and programs. So to me, it's been shut down. And I think the Democrats and Republicans of good conscience, wherever they may be, had an obligation to vote against that bill. But instead of doing that, most of the Democratic caucus held together under Hakeem Jeffries' leadership. But there was one, because there's always one, named Representative Jared Golden from Maine, who voted against the bill despite almost 10% of Maine being on something called Maine Care. A lot of people, when they hear Medicaid and Medicaid being cut and watching Congressman Green standing up with a cane and saying, hey, you don't have a mandate to cut Medicaid. People don't know that a lot of them are on Medicaid. Like in Washington State, it's called Apple Care. In Maine, it's called Maine Care. So there is almost 10% of the state that is on Maine Care. Like, were you thinking about these people when you voted for this legislation? Not to mention $1 billion in cuts to the District of Columbia, where many of them have their second homes, where many of their staff live. Like, you're cutting necessary services for people, all to prove a point and to say to Donald Trump and to Elon Musk, I'm just going to keep giving you this rubber stamp. And I think that's the messaging. There was one Republican, Thomas Massey, who voted against the measure and stood with Democrats. So essentially, Jared Golden is a net. It doesn't matter. But I do want to raise 3 other votes in recent history that are questionable from Jared Golden. I think it gives our audience every reason to call him to question where his allegiance lies. So he voted with Republicans to overturn President Biden's student loan debt cancellation plan. This was in May 2023. He voted against a package of gun control measures in June of 2022, including raising the minimum age for purchasing a semi-automatic rifle from 18 to 21. And the last one I want to call to you all's attention, because I know it's near and dear to the 3 of us, is the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Jared Golden was one of only 2 Democrats to vote against this bill, expressing reservations about qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, the same law enforcement officers who no longer have to be submitted through a database through the Department of Justice, because Donald Trump overturned that too. So congratulations, Jared Golden. You just gave Elon Musk not only the keys to Tesla and SpaceX, but the key to the government with all of your constituents' data and almost guaranteeing cuts to Medicaid across the board or Maine Care. That's all I got to say about that. A little bit of a rant, but hopefully it was clear.
Well, Angela, can I just say real quick on the Maine Care piece, because you've exhibited Maine Care as just one example of how this program gets rebranded once it's in the states.
Yep.
These governors, because Medicaid is a partnership between both the federal government and the state government, under Obamacare, it raised the federal government contribution for Medicaid in these states to 90%. The states then had to kick in the other 10% to cover the cost. But the reason why the American people may not be very clear about them being beneficiaries of Medicaid dollars for healthcare is because the branding, and this kind of gets at the question, which is, Republicans rebrand or they brand and they do it well, but they lie while they're doing it. And then we don't rebrand and we may be earnest at heart, but ineffectual in the outcome. And I think we have been slow to lean into the credit that the party deserves for what it does. I know we hated on Donald Trump for slowing down that first batch of checks, stimulus checks that went out to the American people, thanks to the Democrats under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic caucus delivering that package under Trump's signature. But he said, "No, hold up. I'm gonna put my name on every check." And yes, I realize it's gonna cause delays, but I'm gonna put my name there anyway. All that to say is I do agree with the questioner's question, which is, or the point made in the question, which is, we're just not that good at it. And I often ask myself, Angela and Tiffany, like, is it that the people who we put in front of the cameras aren't savvy enough? Are they not dropping the lines like we need them to in order for them to land? Or is it that the constituency that Democrats have to talk to is so vast and different? It's easy to be on point with your people when you're pretty much a monolith, when everybody pretty much is the same color, practically the same class, and are at least united around the same ideals, which is largely keep black and brown and women folks off of whatever it is that we have. It's not that, but I'm trying to simplify here. Whereas for Democrats, it's more complicated. But are we giving an excuse when I say something like it's just more complicated because the people are more complicated, Tiff? Or is there a way to say easy or simplified things to people and help them understand and grasp what's that consequence, even if they don't understand the hook, line, and letter of the law?
I mean, I appreciate that perspective, Andrew, because honestly, I think that's why so many people are kind of checked out, because so often it's a very inside the beltway conversation where you don't understand what the shutdown means. You don't know what a continuing resolution means. You don't understand what role this senator has and what this means. So I just want to take a quick second and explain what this all means, because people ask that all the time. People DM me, even people who I'm like close with, who are like intelligent people. So it's nothing wrong if you don't know it, but like we have to take time to explain these things. Essentially, Congress is supposed to fund 438 government agencies, but that happens before October 1st. October 1st is when the fiscal year begins for the federal government. At issue are a lot of things that you can imagine, given the Trump administration, that goes to support Angela's point that the government has been shut down. When Congress cannot, because Congress controls the budget, when Congress cannot agree on those things, well, that's when you have conflict. And so once the government is shut down, essential employees will still report to work, but they don't get paid. There was a law that passed that made sure that now government employees will get paid retroactively, but basic services go away, which I don't think a lot of people understand. We talked about Social Security and Medicare, but even like health inspections from the EPA, air traffic controllers still work, but they don't get paid. Subtext to that, again, I want to keep punctuating Angela's point about the government's been shut down. Air traffic controllers still report to work. They don't get paid. Yet we also know that Elon Musk has been laying off people left and right at all these government agencies, which are pretty essential to what we do. Past shutdowns have also delayed tax refunds for people. We're in tax season right now. It's put on hold loans to small businesses, homeowners, prevented patients from enrolling in different programs at the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health. They have clinical trials happening. So this is a really big deal when something like this happens. And I think because I see this happening across the newspapers, across cable news, and I think if we just took a minute to explain to people what this is, how it's going to impact you, I think the more informed people will be, the angrier they will get, and the more they will have their hands dug deep in what's happening here, and they will start blowing up the offices of their members and getting just a lot more outraged at their tax dollars being allocated to things that they don't support, and then the government completely just not functioning. Now, I think also people can get very it's immune to it, because you hear, a government shutdown, and it rarely happens. But I remember, the times in our lifetime when it has happened in our adult life, and how it does cause, it has a ripple
the
effect
last
across
Trump
a lot of things.
administration.
Exactly.
Just the
when
other
Cardi
day.
B came out there, I loved Cardi B's response to this, and she was like, what's going on? It's 2 weeks. But her clip went viral because she put it in such basic terms for people that was very digestible for people to get. So it is a big deal. Should the government shut down? I get a little confused about what's the process. Okay, well, passed in the House, now it's in the Senate. When are we going to know? But I even myself, I can't keep up with every process and every part of the process. So it's just frustrating to me. So I know for the people listening, and you're like, it's kind of over my head. It's over my head too. I have to literally Google sometimes. What is a continuing resolution? Or what is the role of a continuing resolution in a government shutdown? Or once, the budget passes in the House, what is the role of the Senate? So I just think we have to take a second and fill in the gaps where actual journalists fail repeatedly.
Well,
routinely.
yeah, and beyond the journalists, we have an obligation to teach people what we know. So I say in shorter terms, because I tried to make it clear based on even the votes who defected in the House side. One voted with the Democrats, one voted with the Republicans. I explained Jared Golden's voting record that's also been troubling, and encouraged people yesterday on my solo pod to make sure that you call the House of Representatives and urge them at that time to vote against this continuing resolution. Now it's made its way to the Senate. If the Senate passes the exact same bill, then it just goes to Donald Trump to be signed into law. If they pass a different bill, then they have to go through a process called conference, where they have to negotiate on the terms and get on the same page, or the Senate could just send their bill back to the House to be considered. The thing that people should be aware of now is the Senate needs at least 8 Democrats to vote for the CR, for the continuing resolution, for this temporary stopgap measure, so that the government will stay funded. If you don't think it's shut down, again, I argue that it's been shut down, but it needs 8 Democratic senators. Right now, it looks like John Fetterman is the only one, although Richard Blumenthal is saying that he's a likely no, he's likely to vote against it. Call them and pressure them. Hakeem Jeffries should not be getting more pressure than Chuck Schumer when he mostly kept the party in line. There was one defector. Tell Chuck Schumer that he better not lose 8. That's what this is about. And it shouldn't just be on these things. It's about all the things that are impacting us. At some point, budgets became partisan, despite the fact that they fund taxpayers no matter who they voted for. These are fundamental government services. These are not things that are partisan. I know what they're trying to tell you, that all the cuts that they're making in all these various government agencies with Elon Musk chainsaw are because there are waste, fraud, and abuse. The real waste, fraud, and abuse are all the contracting dollars that he's extracting out of the government instead of funding basic services that your neighbors need. So hopefully that is common sense enough as we move on to another topic.
Well, before we move on,
Okay,
I just have
no
one more
problem.
thing on this budget thing, and that's simply to say the Republicans, I want to say this specifically about the Republicans, have consistently driven us to the edge of national embarrassment, economic catastrophe for federal workers, and sending markets, but more important, people, into feeling like we're always in this state of emergency when it comes to our federal budget, the most powerful, wealthiest, strongest nation in all the world. And all I want to say about it is that it would be one thing if these folks were doing this in advance of having run up our debt. The problem is that they run up the debt first, and the debt ceiling comes around, and the federal budget, which we haven't adopted in a number of years under a Republican, because of continuing resolutions, they then decide, you know what, in the spirit of Donald Trump, we're just not going to pay our bills. How about this? The most powerful nation in the world will walk away from its obligation, money it's already spent to create a stunt in Washington, D.C., and make people think like they care about national debt, the budget, and all that other stuff. They don't. They simply hate government and want to see it shut down.
I have a question, Andrew. What is it? Because I didn't read this book, but there was a lot of writing about that taxes don't actually fund the government, but I didn't read it, so it could have been like a tongue-in-cheek point. But also when people say national debt, and you just said, well, we don't pay our bills, money that we've already spent. Specifically, what is that? What is our national debt? And what is the money that they've already spent?
There's a calculator. I'm just gonna pull up the calculator, but I'm gonna say it very, very
and say
succinctly.
where that website is, Andrew, so people have it and they can look it up themselves.
Well, there is, of course, we know what I was going to use was the United States Department of Treasury. But unfortunately, the primary sources now have to be questioned because you've got Trump's people being mandated to go through, scrub certain information.
Pulled whole pages down.
Absolutely.
It's already shut down. That's our point.
There it is. Your point is made. But okay, so right now we're at, what is the national debt? $36.22 trillion. That's the amount of money that the United States government has spent and has borrowed this money. Let me make clear here. The national debt means it's in debt to somebody. And who it's in debt to are a bunch of foreign creditors
China.
Who buy up China, I would say largely the oil and gas tycoons across the planet.
The global south, yep.
Absolutely, right? So the government goes out, spends this money, and then they make absolutely no effort to pay down this bill, y'all. They only crow about it because it's a nice talking point, but the bill continues to accumulate with no plan for how to lower this. Why is this number important? This number is important because you can imagine what the interest rate is on $36.22 trillion, an interest rate that has to be paid every month. I think that the interest rate of this government might be the second or third largest expense of the government is the money it has to pay for what it's borrowed, for what it has already spent. And I just want to say, inside of Democratic and Republican administrations, we've had national debt issues, but the only time they've ever been balanced in the history of the country have been under Democratic presidents. Don't get it twisted. They talk a good game on the other side. However, they drive us to the brink of a shutdown simply for theatrics because they've already spent the money.
Well, I was asking because... I just really quickly, I actually, Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There was that video, somebody dropped it in our group chat of there was a young man saying, I don't blame Elon Musk for, the Doge and firing all these people because government agencies are getting tax breaks for hiring.
Oh, Lord.
Right. For hiring.
It's like Jubilee debate.
It's so ridiculous. And I mean, I am not a tax expert, or I'm not an expert on how the government is funded, but I know basic common sense that your taxes are paying to fund the government. Government agencies are not paying taxes. So obviously they're not getting tax breaks to hire people. But the fact that people saw that and that there are people out there who think that shows how ignorant. And I know y'all don't like it when I say this, but I just say there's some dumb people out there. I would have to say that is a dumb person because even when he was confronted with facts, he very arrogantly just said, I don't think that's true. So
well, and unfortunately, Tiff, that's kind of where we've gone as a country. People continuously are selecting the news based off its alignment with their beliefs.
We can't agree on basic facts anymore.
There are none. And this is what the assault is on the other side is basically, if you remove the facts, if you remove the people who are supposed to argue the facts, if you make all that irrelevant and truth has no base and no relevance in the conversation, then you can sell a people anything you want because there's no primary source to correct them.
Yep.
It's a shame and a sham, but mostly, y'all, this issue around the debt and cutting these jobs, it's very easy, I understand, for everyday Americans to say, I don't like government because it hasn't done such and such for me lately. Most people's interaction with the government is largely around some regulatory thing they have to do, a license that they have to complete for. If you want to own a gun, you got to submit applications and so forth. So a lot of us don't like it because it requires us to do something. But there are days in and days out, moments in, moments out, hours in, hours out, minutes, moments, seconds in, where the grid that gets electric utility to every one of us, including all three of us that are on this pod right now until it goes out, it happens without our effort because other people in the government are putting in the effort to make it work. So you don't have to question whether or not it's coming on when you flip the switch. And that's how it's supposed to work. We shouldn't know always what the government's doing.
All right. The question was also asked, essentially, how is the government funded? And I'm going to refer people to taxpolicycenter.org, where it says that the individual income tax has been the largest single source of federal revenue since 1944. And in 2022, it comprised 54% of total revenues. On this chart that is at the top of taxpolicycenter.org, and what are the sources of revenue for the federal government? Individual income tax by far, corporate income tax, which essentially we indirectly fund because we're paying money into these corporations for goods and services, only 9% of corporate income tax, but yet they dominate with the policies that come out of the House and the executive branch. Social insurance, payroll tax. I have a company that pays payroll tax. That's still my damn money. Excise tax, same thing. And then there's a bucket for other. Now, when you go on to their next page, if people are like, well, that's the feds, what about state and local? I'm so glad you asked. So it's the same thing. We are overwhelmingly responsible at the state and local level with our income tax dollars contributing. And so there's a whole chart breakdown. I won't go to each thing, but it's tax receipts, other receipts, that's still us paying. The money comes from somewhere. Contributions to social insurance programs. Again, the same thing. And then intergovernmental transfers. So the money that goes from the state to the feds or vice versa. The money that goes to local to state to feds or vice versa. We are still paying for it. So cut the crap.
And even if you exist in a state where you have no state income tax, I'm in one of those states where there is no state income tax.
Right here.
You're getting hit and walloped even worse. Why?
Because
worse. The sales tax.
Ask me about it.
Is a regressive tax, and almost every program that they want to fund under Republican control in these states where they say you'll pay no state income tax, largely they're hitting you over the head because every one of you, whether you are a U.S. citizen, a non-U.S. citizen, so long as you go into a store, a gas station, or elsewhere and buy something, you're paying for it. That's why the statement that immigrants and others don't pay taxes, and by the way, I think half of the American people don't necessarily pay federal income tax. They get a refund, but about half the country doesn't pay the federal income tax. That doesn't mean they're not paying taxes. They're paying taxes every day on nearly everything. They're just not getting a credit for having done it.
They still will be paying taxes in their check. Even if they get a refund, they don't get refunded all of the tax payments that they've made in payroll.
No. I'm simply saying, even if you are a worker who does not work on the books, or you work in an industry where it's more cash-driven, cash-laden, and so you're not paying a federal tax in the equivalent way, those people are still paying taxes, and they're largely through the consumer taxes that Republicans love to push onto us. They'll say, we're going to lower the tax exemption on your home, we're going to lower state income taxes, but we're going to increase sales taxes, and that's how they get us on the back end.
I want to complain for a second because, first of all, thank you both because that's informative to me. But this is also happening at the time this week. Linda McMahon, WWE specialist turned education secretary. They have made several steps to shut down the Department of Education. So I think this speaks to what we're talking about. I think what Angela just said definitely informs why people are outraged about tax cuts and who gets tax cuts versus who is still overwhelmingly paying to fund the government. So while the government is shutting down, someone wrote in one of the comments, I read all the comments, y'all. So thank you all for commenting. Even if it's a bad comment, I still read them. I like to know how you guys are receiving the show. But somebody said, Tiffany's always talking about the media. I think she's still bitter, rightfully so, but I think she's still bitter. Yes, I am. I'm here to confirm. Yes, I am. Very, very bitter. Not only for my show, but just for the landscape of journalism. So I was listening to The Daily, New York Times, and it's a popular podcast, but this is why I think Native Land Pod is so important. On The Daily, the reporter who covers education, Dana Goldstein, so they're talking about shutting down the Department of Education, which our tax dollars fund. And they said one of the roles of the Department of Education is when people are complaining that not enough Black or brown students are being taught properly or they're not enrolled in gifted programs, the Department of Education is part of the federal government who will come on the ground locally and investigate this. And then she says, which is inconvenient. Now, I'm listening to this and my head wants to explode because Who gives a shit if it's inconvenient for the local school district? Now, she is an impartial reporter, and this is not meant to attack her. I don't know anything about her except that she covers education for the Times. But my point is they center white people at everything they do and everything they're talking about. Her perspective, which she is shaping for millions of people who continue to read the garbage coverage, the political coverage of the Times, which I do every day, but they have great coverage elsewhere. She's centering white folks, and she's saying, so yes, this is inconvenient. Well, I'd imagine it's pretty goddamn inconvenient for the parents of Black and brown children who have been sidelined, who have their gifted children placed in remedial classes because someone says they're not smart enough or they're not paying attention in class, and they're not given the grace, benefit, understanding, cultural competency to meet them where they are to help educate them. When you get rid of the Department of Education, you are sentencing a whole class of children to be sidelined and creating a entire different society when they go enter the workforce 10, 15, 20 years from now. So it's very frustrating to see our government fall while also seeing the people who are supposed to be on the front lines covering this capitulate and make every excuse and continue to center white folks. So I'm concerned about all of these things happening. And I think it feeds your point, Andrew, about how the government is funded, and your point, Angela, that this government shutdown is not that new to us because the government has been shut down since January 20th of this year.
Well, the worst offense, y'all, in my opinion, is that the conservatives are not being honest with us about why they want to shut down education.
Yes.
If they were being honest with the American people around why they want to shut down the federal Department of Education, it is because they blame it inherently for the enforcement of Brown v. Board of Education and the fact that it was largely the federal government who passed laws and instituted protections that carried out the integration of the Little Rock Nine and Arkansas. Any of the southern states that wanted to defect from federal law and create a two-tiered system, one of white people, first class, and anybody else, but very specifically Black people, to be treated as less than citizens and even less than human. They blame the U.S. Department of Education for encroaching on states' rights, which was basically a state's right to keep Black folks in subpar education centers where their books come from third, fourth, fifth generation hand-me-downs from white schools. That's what they are after. They want to return to the pre-Brown v. Board of Education era of Plessy v. Ferguson. And we ain't going back, y'all.
And privatized education. They know that if you privatize education, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, which of course
and they're already being subsidized.
Right
now.
Right.
So
I want to talk about Selma soon. When we get into that?
Well, first, I think since we're on Department of Education, Andrew, you had something you wanted to raise in this space.
Just real quickly, some of y'all may have seen this week that there was news about the federal government sending Department of Civil Rights sending out letters to 60 institutions, colleges, universities of all stripe, because they say these institutions may be in violation of the Civil Rights Act for their failure to protect against pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas demonstrations on college campuses that occurred in this country and are still occurring, wherein they are suggesting or arguing that any of those protests created a hostile learning environment for Jewish students, and so being a protest that wasn't pro-Palestinian, that wasn't pro-Israeli, were therefore anti-Semitic. What really stresses me out about this position, y'all, is the government's ability here to very quietly, but to me very loudly, step on our First Amendment rights as free speech by essentially deciding that dissent, meaning to have a different opinion about an issue, automatically means that you are against a whole group of people because of their faith and also of their birth. Meaning, if you're Jewish and you don't necessarily side on the same side as the Israeli state, the government, that your opposition must be anti-Semitic. And y'all, I'm afraid of where this line can be drawn, because if you're a Black Lives Matter protester, could they then say that you're anti-white and therefore those protests and protesters should be, I don't know, penalized differently because they are at a different political position than you are? And I think it's gross, but I think we are coming very, very close to something here as it relates to our First Amendment rights that are, I believe, going to be trampled on. Already they have been, but increasingly by states and by the federal government. And if we lose that protection, y'all, where they can round us up and arrest us free will because we have a different political belief, we're further gone than we think.
They reached that level. That we are already there. Just this week, this past weekend, I should say, Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent resident, a green card holder, was kidnapped by the state. ICE came in and removed him from his Columbia paid for apartment. This man is a student. He is a soon-to-be father. His wife is 8 months pregnant. They took him into custody. They're trying to revoke his green card. They will not give him his freedom unless they are ordered by a court. And then we'll see if they even follow court orders. But agents basically told him that he was detained because his visa had been revoked, specifically what you're talking about, Andrew. Because they're trying to say that his demonstrations, his protests are pro-Hamas, and they're leading to activities that are aligned with Hamas, which, of course, the United States considers a designated terrorist organization. This terrifies me the most. The fact that any one of us could come in on this podcast and say something, and that somebody can come in and take us into custody, snatch our liberty, and take us away. We're not waiting to get there. We are there right now.
You're
and
right.
I don't even know how to stop it
or
what to do about it.
The thing is, the reason why I thought it was important for us to illuminate this, and I think we have to keep doing it, is because our rights get taken away with our eyes wide open.
Yeah.
I don't even want to call it a slow process, because it doesn't even feel slow, y'all.
It's not slow.
Every day it feels like the ripping away of what was hard fought, hard struggled, hard to come by. And now we're about to let it slip away so easily. Like, it's on us. Democracies are ensured by its people, by the people, not by the government itself, but by the people. And we're past the line. You're absolutely right. I just think it's important that we continue to lift a light. And I know the next question that folks have is then, well, what do we do about it? We have to raise our voices. We cannot go quietly into the good night. It doesn't work for us. It just doesn't.
Well, speaking of going backwards and things being taken away with our eyes wide open, some of us really felt strongly about being in Selma this past weekend. It's the 60th commemoration of Bloody Sunday, and I can tell you all, on the 50th being there and feeling so proud of progress, and going back 10 years later and feeling concerned that I need to now stand on this hollow ground to get the energy, the inspiration, the strength to endure in this moment is really sobering. It was so powerful to be with so many people. Our sister and friend Joy Reid was awarded at the dinner that they hold on the eve of Bloody Sunday. We had panel discussions, really robust meetings, strategy sessions. But it just still feels so disappointing that in the blink of an eye, in the matter of a couple of months, so much has been rolled back because people ignored the signs and they ignored the ways in which our rights were snatched from us over the last several years, including what the Supreme Court did in Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, right on the other side of President Obama winning 2 terms as the nation's first Black president. And so the question I really have for y'all is, how far have we really come? And why is progress so doggone fragile?
Yeah.
Why can it be snatched? It just feels like it can be yanked from us.
Well, just so our viewers know, Shelby v. Holder is when they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which essentially said that you have to have permission from the federal government before making any changes to your local voting laws. And that existed because there was so much persistent voter suppression happening all across the country. And you saw once that happened, there have been an increase in laws that suppress the vote. I think last I checked, which has been years, probably over a year, there may have been maybe over 70 local ballot initiatives to roll back voting rights, but fact check
300
me on that.
300 pieces of legislation in states throughout the country
Did
over
they
the
pass?
last year.
That they passed or
Oh,
introduced?
no, 300 introduced.
Right,
In
yeah.
state legislatures. You were saying local, so I was just saying, and on the state
States.
side.
Thank you for correcting me. State, and I don't know how many passed, but it might be close to that number, over 300.
No, that's introduced.
Yeah.
But worse over, y'all, they've also used the gutting of Section 5 to gerrymander and to steal seats, congressional seats that had diverse representation. In Florida, they took 2 of the 4 black access seats, which means a district design where an African-American candidate could run and have the potential to win if folks voted along racial lines necessarily, which is not necessarily how it goes. Nonetheless, this governor in my state stole 2 of them. And guess who's there now? White candidates, Republican, male candidates that have taken these seats. And it's happened all across the country thanks to what they handed down to us in Shelby.
And greatly dilutes our political power.
Absolutely.
One thing I want to point out, I want to hear more just about how it felt being there, Angela. But before I ask that, I want to point out what happened on that bridge. I think so often the history is sanitized because the narrators don't often look like us and they control the narrative. But it wasn't like, Congressman John Lewis he wasn't a congressman then, but he was walking past and somebody pushed him down and that was it. I mean, he had his skull fractured. It was not just men, not that it reduces it that it was just our men. Even our men being violently assaulted is horrific, but they also violently assaulted women, children, pregnant women across that bridge. It was a violent, bloody melee of non-violent protesters. Why this was so significant is because this was the first time. Now imagine this is before social media. So a lot of people don't even know what's happening along the Bible Belt in the country, but really all over the country when it came to voting rights. And the violence was so
graphic.
Yes. It was so horrific that ABC at the time, the network, actually interrupted its telecast. They were showing Judgment at Nuremberg at the time, and they interrupted it to show what was happening in Selma, Alabama. Once the rest of the country saw what was happening, then there were people, including allies, including folks who didn't look like us, who said, well, wait a sec, we can't tolerate that. We can't stand for that. And that's when change started to happen. Now that we have these devices and, we're looking at monkeys on a unicycle and, for me, looking at, puppies getting their vaccination shots, we're not necessarily paying attention to those things. So I don't know how to corral the attention of folks. But that was a turning point in history. That revolution was televised, and that's what led to change. So I don't know that we have come that far. And I'll tell you, Angela and Andrew, I feel really defeated. I feel bad because last week on the podcast, I was saying, well, I don't know if I'm hopeful yet. And people are like, what do you expect, Tiffany? But so I don't want to spread my my blanketed bereavement around my despair around what's happening. Yeah. I think, if you don't feel hopeful, please tune into this podcast because Andrew, I feel like you're fighting, you're hopeful. Angela, you are 18 hours every day around the clock doing something to help organize a movement. I'm doing other things, which I'll talk about later, but it is depressing to see because it feels like in this time of being a flat circle, it is a cyclical problem. And I don't know why progress is so fragile, but I just know that not only is progress fragile, this very young democracy is, and it takes participation and awareness to preserve it. And I don't know how we get to that point because we're asking people to care about everything and they end up caring about nothing.
That's why I like, Tiffany, your layup to Angela around the feeling, because I am also likewise curious at a moment like this where you were able to assemble with a lot of folks in our community who frankly sit at the position where people expect them to do something all the time to protect us. Tell me, what does being in Selma, 60 years on that hollow ground, mean for an organizing leader like yourself and folks that you were with, to just gird them up in this moment? Because there is a lot of despair. I don't think any of us should refuse that exists. The question is once we confront the despair, then what do we do with it? And I'm just wondering, what kind of fuel, if any, do the leaders get, right? So that they can keep leading.
And how did it feel to your spirit to be there?
Yeah, and I meant to address this earlier, so sorry if I didn't. But yes, it felt good to be there. It felt necessary. It provided us, again, a sobering opportunity to reflect on how far we've come and how quickly progress can be rolled back. I think beyond the politics of who's going to be in the picture in the front, even seeing the Reverend Jackson's commitment to be there, with Parkinson's in a wheelchair,
pushed
and
by his son,
among others. Reverend Sharpton, Congresswoman Waters, Hakeem Jeffries, Derek Johnson, and Latasha Brown, who was rallying folks, singing in a bullhorn because something happened with the sound system. It was reminding us of, when there's not a way, we make one. So I think it's necessary. I hope that Black folks in this time will continue to convene, to gather. Strategy ain't gonna happen out of nowhere. Yeah. Hope isn't gonna be given to you with no action. The moment requires us to sacrificially come together to find a better way. It just does. And I think that we'll continue to be in despair. We'll continue to be fearful. We'll continue to be scrambling about what to do so long as we don't prioritize what our next steps must be. There is the fierce urgency of now, and I wish that it wasn't, but that is where we are, and I think we'll be able to better fight it once we accept what is.
So can I ask, do you feel despair? Because you're doing these things, you're in the fight. Do you ever feel despair? Do you feel because when you ask that question, you sound exhausted. You sound like, why is our progress so fragile? And I feel that. I really do feel that. And I think so. You, Latasha Brown, all the other people who are in this fight, are you saying I don't feel that despair because I'm actively fighting something every day? Or, yeah, I feel that despair too, but I know if I keep moving, then that's the only way to progress.
Well, let me turn the question to you, Tiff. Feeling despair, in the feeling of despair that you have, how do you think you get out of that? What is the way out of despair?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. And I'm not apathetic. I'm not sitting around doing nothing. But sometimes I do look at the things that are happening and I wonder, how does that stop what's happening right now? I feel like I'm in the middle of the storm watching all this happen. And I'm like, I don't even know how to stop it. But there's something, that's why I think there is something to being hopeful, what did it mean to be in Selma? How is going to Selma stopping something? How is standing on the floor of Congress singing "We Shall Overcome" stopping something? I don't want to dismiss those things because Black folks and our hope, we need that hope to go on. I just don't know what the tangible thing is that we're stopping.
I think that my question is, and maybe I'm probably asking it poorly, but I would love to know, even from our audience, if you are feeling despair, but you're not apathetic, what are you doing? What are you actively doing to not feel the despair? If you're feeling sad, about something else, let's say it's not even about the government, but if you're feeling sadness, how do you combat that sadness? If you're feeling hopeless, how do you combat that hopelessness? If you're feeling despair, how do you combat that despair? Or do you just say, I'm going to sit in it until it passes? No. I mean, that is a way. And then if you're saying, well, I'm not apathetic, so then there's some action that you're taking to not sit in apathy. What is that action?
Well, I'll say what I can. I don't want to say a lot about it, but one thing for me that I'm caught up in the middle in is writing, bearing witness to this and writing. And I'll say more about that later. But I don't have the ability to disconnect from it. I'm mired in it. It can weigh me down. And when I'm not in it, I feel lighter. I feel better. But trying to keep up with everything. And I write every day from 10 a.m. till about 7 p.m. There are other things that I am finding my way to participate in, which I don't, I I want to protect and preserve some of the work that's happening. But, there are some of us who are involved in conversations happening. And I'm looking for that thing within those groups of, well, what is the thing that I can attach to where I'm doing something to stop this? And I haven't quite found that thing.
Is it possible that the work, the cathartic, and even weighing work of being the teller of the time is a contribution?
Yes, I mean, what we do here, but I mean, to Angela's point, though, I think we have to do more. Whatever we're doing, we have to do more of it.
Sure.
I just don't know that doing, like, what I'm not good at is swinging at the wind. What I'm not good at is, like, I'm gonna just do a bunch of actions and, scramble myself in a tizzy. Like, no, I do want to be still and purposeful. If I'm going to lend my time and resources and my very limited time and time deficit of actual, work that pays me, then what is it? And sometimes I do feel like in the chaos of it all, I wonder, well, what did this actually stop? What did it move? But I hate saying that because I feel like if that's what you're doing and, maybe something's going to stop. Well, somebody was like, well, what's it going to mean if we cross the bridge? All we doing is walk across the bridge, and that was a big moment to change things. So I don't want my despair to be infectious. I don't know. Whatever I'm doing is not enough. Bearing witness to things isn't enough. But that's just what I've, done.
And by the way,
I'm not an organizer. I know that much. But that doesn't mean that I can't be supportive to the organizers. You
are an organizer because I've been on the receiving end of your organizing work.
Angela is an organizer. I mean, I would say Angela is an organizer.
She is as well. But this is what I think. I think we often make the bar for entry too damn high.
Yep.
You don't have to be an Angela Rye. I love her.
Nope.
And I'm thankful to God for her, for our people. No. Yes, we need new ones. You need acolytes and people who will replace you. But I just think we spend a lot of energy in our community knowing that we carry the weight of so much. Shit, waking up every day. How does James Baldwin put it? Waking up as a black man in America, every day.
To be conscious, to be enraged.
Right? It's to be enraged. So that's already a feat. But we don't have to make the bar. You too have to organize a 24-hour, meeting-a-thon for the urgency of the moment. And by the way, do it in 48 hours from this point. The production needs to take place. You don't necessarily have to be the person who's out there getting the most new voter registration cards signed. Maybe you're the one who's actually building the teams, training people so that they don't run afoul of the law while they're in the process of collecting voter registration cards. I only say this, y'all. I used an example. And by the way, I want to invite people onto listening to my solo pods as they release, because we're trying to demystify this question, the big question of what do I do and how do I start? If we make the start so big, there are a lot of people who will check out before they ever take a step forward. And I just think we are all here. We're designed with our own respective gifts and things that we can contribute. I've saved the saying, and I think RJ hates it when I said you can't eat an elephant in a whole or in one bite. That you can't
said
eat
that
the
the
big
last 3
thing
weeks.
at one. All I'm saying, because it's, for me, that's how I understand that.
I'm trying to figure out who's requiring that of anybody. Our EP Lauren actually has a question.
Oh yeah,
I think it is true.
Our EP Lauren has a question about this, and I think that maybe hearing it from a layperson that is also organizing, even neighbor to neighbor, is important. So let's hear Lauren's question on this.
Hey Native Land Pod, it's your EP Lauren. I'm coming with a question about organizing. Also, I'm calling from sunny Brooklyn. I think you like to know that. I obviously listened to Andrew's solo pod yesterday, and I'm so inspired, and I literally took notes so I could share this with my group, but I've done some of the things that you've talked about. So a friend of mine after the election started a community group, feeling despondent about the results and wanting to do something. We gathered friends and neighbors and other parents, and we have met like half a dozen times. We brainstormed issues that feel important to us, which are all over the map, like super local, like safety on our streets or like our schools, to climate and repro rights, and it gets really big. I'm just sort of wondering, I've never done this before, and as the leader of this, every time I meet with our group, I love it and I feel really good, but I'm also like, it feels like I'm weeding through a thicket. I'm like, is this the work? Is this what you're supposed to do? You just meet and talk and brainstorm. Like nothing really feels concrete. It's like we're kind of blindly taking one step forward at a time. And I'm from a newly sort of organizer to you all, like, is this what you're supposed to do? Is there something more concrete that we can do? Am I doing it wrong? I just love some advice for this group that's trying to get off the ground and find their footing. I don't know. Just thank you so much for your leadership. Appreciate you guys and love working with you. Bye.
We love you too,
I love
We
that,
love you,
Lauren. I love that
I think
question.
that what Lauren shared is so important because I don't think that there's anybody throughout history that has engaged in a movement that became significant that knew from the outside, like, oh, this going to be the one. Like, I don't think Minister Farrakhan was like, I'm definitely going to get 1 million people. I know I'm going to strive for it, but what happens if only 5 people show up? You know, I don't think that on the March on Washington, they knew it was going to be that. I don't even think for the Women's March, despite a lot of its flaws, knew that it was going to be that. I think that you have to start somewhere, and you are flying blind. The grace that we should be extending to each other right now is we have never been here before.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what is going to work. What we do know is that there has to be resistance. We do know that there has to be a fight. We do know that there has to be an opposition. We do know that we got to stand on truth. We do know that we have to protect the most vulnerable. Maybe your role isn't every single one of those pieces, but you take on your part. It is imperative that we do something. You sitting by and watching what is happening, saying, oh, I don't know where to start, is going to mean that we end up with our asses handed to us. Like, we got to get in the game. My biggest frustration right now is there's so many people that got smoked for everybody who's doing something. But when we turn around and be like, well, what you doing? It's like, you got to start somewhere. You really, really do. And so I do think it's in the conversation, but it's beyond the conversation to making a call to Congress. It's beyond making a call to Congress to go pulling on a government building door to see if you can get into the door that you pay for. You know, it really is figuring out how to protect your kids at school, special needs kids who may be impacted by these disastrous cuts to the Department of Education, most of which, now that we know that half the employees have been told to go home and they can come get their personal effects later, most of which has not even been congressionally sanctioned. So the fight is in the other 2 co-equal branches of government. If you have a lawsuit and you got standing, sue. If you know that you have some inroads with Congress, call them. Make a visit when you're at a fundraiser. Let them know what it really is. But you got to do something. I think every single day, if somebody takes one action, we're a lot closer to a victory than without.
I gotta be honest, I have not seen, I've only heard tangentially about the people having smoke for people who are trying to do something. I have not seen that. I've not experienced it. I know how I know it is because in our chat sometimes that, you know, we'll talk about it. I do have to say, if you are criticizing what other people are doing, then that is like you have to, you can't criticize and not, you know, be involved. But I like the question that you posed to the audience, and it's something that I would actually like to hear from the audience. What did you say, Angela? Like, basically, what are y'all doing? If you feel despair, what are you doing about it? Was that your question?
Yeah, like how do you solve for despair? How do you solve for feeling stuck in this moment? How do you solve for that? What are you doing to solve for it? And if you're like, help, I don't know, y'all tell me. Listen to Andrew's organizing pod. He's basically doing a masterclass breakdown every other Monday to talk about these things. On an Instagram Live yesterday, on my solo pod yesterday, talked about specifically just calling Congress. I think we should call Congress and reach out to these offices. I think we should do it on air to let people know how it goes. When you call, they have to answer. They owe you an explanation.
We should do that.
Yeah,
I do think I want
to
co-sign, but I also want to, as a local person, say shout out Lauren on the local emphasis. She said we're talking about our neighborhood, our streets, our schools, our safety. Is the work the convening part? Well, guess what? If your group decides that the work you all are doing is that every day we are all weighed down by the facts of life as they hit us, either from the federal, the world, the global, or what's happening locally. And so the best thing you can do to not get stuck on stunned is to convene together and talk through it. That way, as you all fan back out, Everybody is interacting in their space now with a different recharged mindset. Maybe that recharged mindset puts them in contact with people who are feeling despair and haven't had an opportunity for hope, who now feel hope because they see somebody who's just like them, who shares their beliefs and opinion, who are as sad about what they see happening nationally or in their state or in their local, but they have some joy in it. And they have some joy in the work. If that is what the group decides, then yes, that is the work, Lauren. It doesn't have to be too high-minded or too lowbrow. It has to, however, reflect what the community, the folks you have pulled together, believe is the reach, the objective, the goal that you all want to see realized. Maybe it is that y'all set a goal around voter registration in your precinct. Or as a cohort, we're gonna have 500 new registered voters by the time the midterm comes around. And not only that, we will have invited every single one of them to one of our sit downs. Every person we register, we use as an extension to invite them into this setting for every time we meet, that they can become more conscious minded about what they can do as individuals to help your local area, your community, and obviously the nation. We on the left, I think, too often organize people exclusively around electioneering. Mm-hmm. And we've left a lot of people on the sidelines. I would love to see more work like you're doing, Lauren, where people are organizing each other toward getting to the beloved community, because then they gonna know before you even tell them that if Trump takes away education, these are gonna be the residual impacts. And that's why we have to wake up to it.
And that's
because
the thing, too.
Everyone doesn't interact with those issues the same way.
That's the thing, too. We don't know how far he's going to go and how people will be able to stop it. We've seen a few successful instances. All right, y'all. So it's that time. It's time for some action. We've debated whether or not action or inaction works better in these times, and how we fight back. So my call to action is to remember you can always do something. Shout out to our EP, Lauren, for submitting a question today. And all of you who submit questions every single week, we are so grateful. But I will tell you, never, ever, ever give up. In the spirit of John Robert Lewis, who did cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, was bludgeoned and bloodied for us, to ensure that our voting rights would always be protected, and more broadly, our civil rights. Tiff, what you got?
I will stick with your CTA, because I'm one of those people that's suspended in the onslaught of all these attacks, looking at it, wondering, what do I do? And so if I could do something, you guys tell me if this is even realistic, I would like to build some sort of infrastructure that immediately protects our people, to engage in harm reduction. Because I don't know how to stop the onslaught, but I look at the work of Fred Hampton. I look at the work of the Black Panthers, and they had the free food program. They had a whole education system. That is something that feels right to me. That is something I feel like I could latch onto. I don't have the time capacity or ability to lead it, but I could certainly work in something like that. That's just an idea. And I think ideas matter. So I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you think I should be doing, what y'all are doing. If you are feeling despair, to Angela's point, answer her question about how you move past that despair, and any ideas, because ideas matter. So yeah, that's my CTA. And just thank you to Andrew for teaching us organizing every other week, and to Angela for your tireless effort. I don't know how you do it. But thank you to you both for at least being in it. And shout out to the people who do feel like me, like, what is any of this stopping? Like, how can we
You're
stop
not giving enough credit to yourself. You're in it, friend. I know you are.
I mean, I'm in it and like writing about it, bearing witness to it, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything that's tangible. And the beauty is
somebody will be able to one day read that and take from it some action steps on how to survive it. All of us are reflecting back on moments that preceded us as inspiration. Every one of us. And so there's value. There's big value.
Well, I remember we were in Miami at Kim Blackwell's conference. Shout out to Kim Blackwell. And we had a similar question. And Angela, you said that if you're tired, maybe someone else is not tired in the same way that you are. So collectively, you can build that work. And when we say grassroots is just your neighborhood. You could be wealthy and doing grassroots if you're talking to your neighbors about something. That's grassroots. So I know there's something. I want to do something tangible. I think the Target thing also feels like it will there's a tangible result in that, and you give people hope in that, and then you build on that hope and go to the next thing. So I don't know, guys. I'm just suspended in it. I don't want to spread my despair, but I want to hear from y'all to give me some hope.
You're not spreading it. I think what we were doing is we're normalizing the conversation so that we can move more people past it. It shouldn't be a roadblock for us, right? And my CTA is issued to us, which is, in these moments of despair, I would like to know who gives permission for the joy, who brings the joy, who helps us experience. There's not one of us who could wake up every single day, day in, day out, just pushing the rock up the hill. Because at some point you get tired and you need somebody else to tap in, or we got to sleep in shifts and somebody's on this time and somebody else is on this time. But even that requires a space for renewal and joy. And if I would say something as an observation of what it's felt like since Trump, it's been a lot of no joy for me. Because unlike them, we don't bask in the destruction of our neighbors, friends, church members, classmates, co-workers, and colleagues. That's not how we get our thing off. It works for them, but not for us. So I love for us to be intentional about creating the permission structure for joy while we fight.
I love that.
Well, with all of that, thank you all so much for tuning in today. This again is episode 70 of Native Land Pod. And just one moment while I tell you how many days. It's too many days until midterm elections that hopefully we get to see. It's 600 days remaining. And with that, we thank you all so much. Know that new episodes do still drop every single Thursday and Friday is our mini pod. Solo pods are Monday and Tuesday. We got y'all covered wall to wall, except for Wednesdays when we record this here podcast. If you need more, check out Spolitics and Off the Cup, the other shows on our Reason Choice Media Network. And don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our text or email lists on our website, nativelandpod.com. We are Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, and Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, y'all.
Welcome home, everybody.
Welcome home, y'all.
Have a good week.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rye, Gillum, and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.